This video is going to help you understand how to add programs in your calculator. Programs are things that we can use to execute functions on our calculator that we otherwise couldn't do. So to start, we are going to hit the program button in the middle of our calculator. And that's going to take us to a screen where it says either execute, edit, or new. We are in the new phase, right, where we want to create a new program. The program we are actually going to create is we're going to create an absolute value program. If you recall from chapter 1, when we solve absolute values, they typically have two solutions, right? We have the positive solution when we take what's in the absolute value, turn it positive, and we have the negative solution when we take what's in the absolute value and make it negative. So we appropriately might call this absolute value, or ABS-VAL maybe for short. As you can see, your calculator has the ability to put in letters, right? So if we hit math, right, in this case it's going to show up with an A because it knows we're trying to type the name of a program. So I'm going to write ABS, right, and then VAL. So when we go to call this program, right, it's going to be called ABS-VAL. So I'll hit enter. Okay. Now if we hit program again, we go back to our home screen and hit program again, you'll see ABS-VAL is one of our options now. Now we actually want to edit that program. So we're going to go over to head edit and hit enter. Okay, the very first thing that we're going to do is in our program, we want to display to the user what form the absolute value needs to be in. All right, so we're basically going to tell them, look, we can only run this program if the absolute value is of a certain form. So to be able to do that, right, we need to display something when this program is run. So if you hit program again, it's going to bring up a slightly different screen. We're going to tab over to I/O, which stands for input output, and we're going to go down to option 3 so we can display. So we'll hit enter. And whenever we display something, we need to display it in quotation marks. So I'm going to hit alpha and then hit the quotation marks so that begins what I'm displaying. Now here's the form that we would want someone to input an absolute value in. All right, we'll have, let's say, a D value for whatever the absolute value equals. To put in an equal sign, we go to math. We go to second math. And the first option is an equal sign. Okay, so D equals, and then typically with an absolute value, we have some kind of value out front, so we'll call that A. You might recall from your classes when we graphed absolute values in math, we have a num, right, abs, so we'll go to that. So A times the absolute value of, and now we want to have our X in there. Okay, and then maybe we have some kind of addition or subtraction. We'll just say minus B for now. Close the parentheses for the absolute value, and then let's say we have some coefficient on the outside. And then I'll close my quotations. So this one line of code is going to display exactly what you see here. D equals A abs X minus B plus C. And we're basically telling the person, all right, this is the form that your absolute value needs to be in. So we'll hit enter, and that's that line of code. The next thing we want the user to be able to do is actually input the values D, A, B, and C. So instead of displaying that to them, we want to prompt them for those values. So we're going to hit program again, go over to input output, down to prompt, and we're going to list all the variables we want. Well, we want A, and we want B, C, and finally D. So that's going to ask the user to input those 4 variables. Once I have those, I can get into the actual algebra of solving for the absolute value. So you might recall from class, to solve for an absolute value, we need to isolate the absolute value, which means I want to subtract C and divide by A. So let's see what that would look like, right? If I want to subtract C from D, I would say D minus C, right? And I want to divide that quantity by A. And if I close the parentheses, you'll see, right, this open and closed parentheses is holding this entire quantity. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to store this in a new variable. So I can hit STO right down here. That stands for store. And let's just call this variable E, right, because that's, you know, my next letter to use. I'll call that E. Okay? So I have D minus C over A is going to be stored in E. So that means when we actually go to solve the absolute value, I'm taking the value E, right, and I'm either adding or subtracting B, depending on if I'm in the positive or the negative case. So let's assume I'm in the positive case first. That's going to mean I take E plus B, and let's just store this in a new variable to make our lives easier. Maybe we'll store it in F. Okay, so now we know what E holds, we know what F holds. Okay, but of course we know that it's not always the positive case. We want to include the negative case. So let's do that, and instead of it being E plus B, we're actually going to have B minus E. And if you're confused about the algebra for that, right, just do it out like we used to do the positive case and the negative case. All right, so then we have B minus E. And again, we're just going to store that in another variable for simplicity. And I think we're up to the letter G. So now we have a lot of what we need so far, right? We've isolated the absolute value, right? I've gotten my two solutions, F and G, okay? But as you might remember from class, absolute values don't always have solutions, right? If an absolute value is equal to a negative number, there is no solution. So we want to account for that. So our program actually has the ability to do a if-then statement. And if you're at all familiar with computer science, that'll make sense to you, right? But basically what it's saying, if some condition is true, then we'll do a certain set of lines. And if it's not true, we'll do something else. Okay? So to start that, we're going to hit program. And you'll see the very first option is if. So we'll hit that. And basically what we want to say is if E, right, if once we've isolated the absolute value, if that value is negative, so if E is less than 0, so to get less than, we hit second math again, just like we did to get the equal sign, but we'll go down to less than, whoops, one too far. If E is less than 0, all right, then I need to tell it to then do something. So again, I need to go program and then hit then. So if E is less than 0, then I'm going to display that there's no solution. So remember, to get display, we go to program, input, output, display. Okay, and then you might recall from the first line here, I need to display what I want to display in, sorry about that, in quotations. Let me just go back. I hit the wrong button there. Right, we'll hit alpha quotation. And then I'm going to say no solution. So a quick way to do this is if you hit second alpha, it actually turns on the alpha lock, so it'll only put in letters. All right, and we're going to put in no space solution. And once we type in no solution, we want to end that with quotation marks. Okay, then I'll turn my second alpha off, right, the alpha lock, hit enter. All right, so remember, what was our whole point here? We were saying if what the absolute value is equal to is negative, then display no solution. Okay, but if it's not negative, we want to do something else, right? So there's actually a way to say that. If this is true, do this, otherwise do something else. It's called an else statement. So we're going to hit program again, but go down to else this time. So we're going to say if it's negative, display no solution. Otherwise, we actually want to display the values we got, which are f and g. So I'm going to go to program, display, and then my first variable is f. Now here's a fun trick, right? We like fractions because it gives us a little bit more information and especially helps us if there's a very long decimal, we don't want to round. All right, so if we actually hit math and fraction, this will turn f into a fraction, which will be helpful. All right, and then my other variable to display is g, right? Because remember our absolute value could have two solutions. So I want to display g also as a fraction. All right, and then that's it. That's my whole code. And all I need to do is I need to tell the program that I'm done with my if-else statement. So I will go to my control and go down, whoops, to number 7 to end it. Okay, so let's take a look at everything we have here. What did we do? All right, the first thing we did is we displayed the form that we want the person to put in the absolute value as. All right, it has to be of this form. And you know, if there's nothing being added to the absolute value, then they can just say C is 0. That's fine. All right, so then we're going to prompt them for the 4 variables that are being related in that equation. Then we're actually going to isolate the absolute value and store that value in a new variable called E. And then using that, we're using our positive case to find this first solution F, our negative case to find the first solution G. We're saying if once the absolute value is isolated, it equals a negative number, there is no solution, right? Otherwise, display the 2 solutions we found as fractions, and then we're all done. So we've programmed everything. Let's make sure it works. So if I hit second quit, it'll take me back to my home screen. And to actually execute a program, you hit program. And instead of going over to edit, which what we did last time, we actually want to execute the program. So it's going to say program abs val. I'm going to hit enter. Oh, look, this is good. It's displaying what we wanted it to display. And now it's going to prompt me for A, B, C, and D. So let's say we wanted to do a very simple absolute value. Let's just say we wanted to do 2 equals the absolute value of x minus 2. So 2 equals the absolute value of x minus 2. Well, A would just be 1, B would be 2, C would be 0, and D would be 2. And it gives me my 2 solutions. It's saying the solutions for 2 equals the absolute value of x minus 2 are 4 and 0. Great, okay, we have our 2 solutions. Let's check it if we had a no solution situation, right? Because we want to make sure our program works with any case. So now I can run the program again. I'm going to hit program, absolute value, hit enter. Again, it's telling me the form it needs it in. It's going to ask me for A, B, C, and D. So let's just keep this simple, right? Let's say A is 1, B is 0, and C is 0. So that means on the right side of the equation, we just have the absolute value of x. And let's just set it equal to a negative number, maybe negative 3. This should give us no solution, right? Because an absolute value cannot equal a negative number. So if we program this correctly, it'll tell us no solution. Fingers crossed. Ah, great. No solution. The program is done. It's done its work. Okay, so this is a great way to check your work when you're solving an absolute value. Just be careful because this only works if you put the absolute value in this form, right? Which means there can be no coefficient with the x. All right, you'd have to factor that out and be really careful. So you've just created your first calculator program. These things can get really fancy. We just scratched the surface on this, so there's really a lot you could do. If you're interested, There are tons of YouTube videos and websites dedicated to creating programs on your calculator. If this is something that you find easy or fun, you can make tons of programs that do a lot of fun things and actually things that will really help you in Algebra 2. Tomorrow in class, you're going to be doing your own program, slightly different, all right, but using the same operations we learned here, and it'll be another program that I promise will be super helpful on your final exam. Don't forget, you can always rewind, rewatch this, all right, and hopefully you can follow my key steps, which were being recorded all the way to the right. Good luck, and good luck tomorrow.